Appreciate you all being here. We're going to talk some ideas today about something called the happiness advantage. For those of you guys that are big readers, all of this is based upon content that's in a book written by Sean Achor, A-C-H-O-R. Sean Achor, phenomenal speaker. He's done TED Talks. He's written a great book called The Happiness Advantage. So I'm going to go into a couple of the, some of his main points, then some of my own content. But if you guys want to go really in depth into this stuff, phenomenal book. I would totally recommend. What do y'all think when we think about happiness? I think this is something that is such a kind of fascinating topic because in our society, how do we usually conceptualize happiness? What do we usually think about when we say what makes someone happy? What's the general view of happiness in our society? What does it take to be happy? What causes happiness? Success, I think that's a big one. How many of you guys naturally think about success with happiness, that when I have my dream job one day, when I'm doing exactly what I want to do with my life, then I'll be really happy, when I've achieved that level of success. Or if you succeed at something even now, if you get elected as the president of a student organization that you were really hoping to get, or if you get a great grade on a test, that kind of level of success, we typically attribute that to happiness, right? What else do we think about when we think about happiness?
Friends.
Yeah. Friends? Yeah, just being around, friends, loved ones. I think that, absolutely. What else do we think about? Yeah.
You're content with the decisions you're making.
Just having contentment of the decisions you're making. You're living the life that you want to live and the way you want to live it. Yeah. And I think that some of these are very healthy conceptions of what happiness is, and some of them can be very, very damaging and very challenging for a lot of people. When I think about the, friends, family is phenomenal. To have that as part of your source of happiness is a great thing when you're content with the decisions you make. Where we typically get tripped up is when we put all of our happiness into success or into the events of a particular day. I generally think that most people in our society are about as happy as their circumstances allow. Would you all agree with that? That if our day's going well, if nothing bad's happened, if we've been sufficiently entertained for our needs, I think our society, a lot of times we have a tendency to exist from entertainment to entertainment a little bit, which is a different story altogether. But generally, if our circumstances allow it, we're happy. Is typically, I think, the way most of us think about this. And generally, when we talk about the success model of happiness, what we're told in our society is, all right, get good grades, get your degree, get a job, then you'll be happy. And then once you get the promotion, then you'll be happier. And then once you get to the next level up, you'll be happy. And a lot of times we have a tendency to push happiness to that next thing, to that next goal that we have. Do you all catch yourself doing that sometimes, where you say, when this, then I'll be happy, instead of actually learning to be happy in the moment? And the thing that Sean talks about in his book is that happiness works in reverse, is that by pushing that happiness past the cognitive horizon where you're constantly seeking for the next thing that'll make you happy, it robs you of the opportunity to be happy in the moment that you're in. And the irony is that when you're happy in the moment that you're in, you actually are far more productive. How many of you guys notice that when you're stressed out trying to study, that your brain just doesn't function? That if you're really, really stressed about a test coming up or a paper, yet if you're actually in a pretty good mood, you're all right, I really should study, and you're just but you're in a better spirits, that you just are so much more productive. They've done a lot of studies on this, and the brain, when happy, when it floods your brain with dopamine, it turns on all the learning centers in your brain, so you actually learn more effectively while happy than when you're negative or stressed. And so I want to share a few thoughts with you today on how you can be happier in the moment that will help you produce at a higher level, regardless whether it's in a job that you're in, whether it's studying for a class. And then I want to talk to you about some of the things that we have a tendency to let derail our happiness. So those of you guys are taking notes. A couple of things that Sean talks about in his book that I really liked was just some little simple things you can do every single day that will actually increase your overall happiness levels. The first thing is 3 daily gratitudes, is 3 things that you're grateful for every single day. How many of you guys have found that whenever you're thinking about things you're grateful for, you're naturally happy? Right? It's impossible to be grateful and upset at the same time. Your brain can't hold thankfulness and stress in your brain simultaneously. You're either stressed or you're thankful. You're either happy or... does that make sense? And 3 gratitudes is a very powerful way to do this. I would encourage you all to do this for 21 days. I did this after the first time that I saw Sean's TED Talk, and it was really pretty transformative. For 21 days, I just wrote down 3 new things I was thankful for. The key is 3 new things, because what happens is the first day is you use all your big ticket items. You're hey, I'm thankful for my family, I'm thankful for a great support network of friends, I'm thankful for a career that I love and I'm passionate about. Day 2, you're I'm thankful for my health, I'm thankful. and you go through these like really obvious things you should be thankful for, you get to day 16, and you're just like, huh. You have to like think of things, it's like, man, I'm really thankful for a white chocolate mocha at Starbucks. Does that make sense? But what happens is by training your brain throughout the course of the day, what you start to do is you start to look for things you're thankful for because you're journaling about at the end of the day. And all of a sudden, the whole day is it's really a pretty cool thing. You start to notice yourself noticing little things you're thankful for that typically we don't even think about. We don't even think about the convenience in our society of being able to have a cell phone. Don't we take that for granted? When I was a freshman in college, about half of our dorm had cell phones, half didn't. We're not talking smartphones, we're talking cell phones. And this was only in 2000. I'm not that old. Sociologists consider millennials to be all the way up to 33, which is exactly how old I am. So I'm actually in your generation, which makes me feel really young. But 33, I didn't have a cell phone freshman year. Isn't that kind of a weird thing to think about? I actually had to call home and come home and listen to a voicemail system that was attached to a phone on a wall. Seems very primitive at this point, but we just take that for granted. We're not even thankful for things like cell phones. And if you'll do this happiness journal for 21 straight days, you naturally catch your brain scanning the world for the positive instead of the negative because you're going to be journaling about that day, and you're retraining your brain to be thankful. The second thing that I would really encourage you all to do is actually go out of your way to commit conscious acts of kindness. We always hear about random acts of kindness, but they're a lot more powerful instead of just, you just do it on a spur of a moment. Those are great too. Keep doing lots of those. But consciously choosing to go out of your way to do something kind for another person, why do you think that's so much more powerful than just even a random act of kindness? For you, not necessarily for the person, because for them it's all the same, if you're doing something that's really nice. But for you, consciously choosing to go do something, why do you think that would help raise your own happiness level, your own positivity in the present moment? Yeah. When you put thoughts into anything in life, isn't it more powerful? Positive or negative. And if you're consciously going out of your way every single day to do just a random act of kindness for another individual that they're not expecting, you'd be amazed. I love doing this at restaurants when you go out. Any servers in the room? Any people that have waited tables before? Wow, just Hermie. That's amazing. Hermie, on a $20 bill that someone comes in, do you remember the difference psychologically from getting a $4 tip to a $5 tip or a $5 to a $6 tip? I waited tables, and you get a $6 tip instead of a $5 tip, and you're like, oh my gosh, 30%. It just totally makes your night. It's only $1. Isn't that kind of funny to think about? That $1 somehow impacted my overall mood for the next hour and a half, or Hermie's mood. And are you ever going to miss that extra $1 that you tip someone? You think you're going to get to the point where it's well, my electricity's getting turned off if I just not tipped that $1? Does that make sense? And so for me, I love doing that. I love just being because the difference between being a good tipper and a, oh my gosh, incredibly generous tipper is $1 in most cases. But it's amazing how that conscious act of kindness, that server, I promised, for the next hour and a half had a really nice night, and they're remembering that table that tipped $6 on a $20 bill, even though it's such an inconsequential gesture. Finding little things like that you can do to brighten people's days, it feels good knowing that you're spreading joy throughout that. I love talking with people, when I go up to a Panera, a coffee shop, and just joking around and making them laugh, and having fun with people. If you can tell they're not really enjoying their job, but just really encouraging them. Hey, I hope you have an awesome rest of the day. And they're like, thanks. At the end of it, you can totally change their mood in just a matter of a 2-minute conversation if you actually go out of your way to do it. So commit conscious acts of kindness. The third thing I encourage you all to do is work out regularly. Work out regularly. This has been proven in study after study after study to raise your happiness level. How many of you all notice that when you're in a good workout routine, you're happier? Super obvious. We all know it's true. And yet, we frequently fall in and out of habit, don't we? Some of you guys are probably awesome, totally workout Nazis. You always work out. But how many of you guys are I work out a ton. I don't work at all for 2 months. I work out a bunch. Not at all for a month and a half. How many of you guys are on that routine? Yeah, that's where I am. I'm constantly the most disciplined person working out, and then just totally fall off the wagon, even though I know that it's really, really good. So I would encourage you guys, get in that habit. Just form that habit, because all these things are about habits. If you just do these things randomly every once in a while, there's no power to it. There's no power in journaling one day about 3 things you're happy about. Doesn't have any impact. You might for 30 seconds be oh, cool, I'm grateful. But it doesn't help your brain rewire itself. All of these things that I'm sharing with you right now have been scientifically proven, if you'll do them over a 3-4 week period, to actually start to rewire your brain to be happier in the moment. But it doesn't happen overnight. It's not something you can do one time and be man, I worked out for a day, did 3 journals, did a random act of kindness, and now I went from depressed to totally happy. Does Does this make sense? It's a process. It takes time to kind of rewire your brain towards this. The fourth thing is I would take some time every single day to spend time either in meditation, prayer, but it's quiet time where it's just you, calm, at least for 10 or 15 minutes. We have created such an ADD society where we're constantly going from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing, half the time doing two things at once. Any of you all catch yourself doing that all the time? You know, it cracks me up. Like, I'll catch myself doing it. Any of you guys watch TV, like entertaining, like watching a sport or watching something you actually like, and you also have your phone out or your tablet? Any of you guys catch yourself doing that? Isn't that kind of weird? Because I catch myself doing that too sometimes. It's like, I can't even just be still enough to watch something entertaining. It's kind of how we're training our brain, though, is that we can't just be still. Even if it's something that we're actually enjoying, we're like, oh, there was a dead ball for like 10 seconds in, the NBA, and now I'm like checking Twitter. As like, why? But we're training our brain to not be content and in the moment. Meditation starts to kind of undo that a little bit, and it retrains your brain on how to be present and in the moment, because the biggest thing that robs people of happiness is not being where you are. It's incredibly hard to be happy when you're thinking about the future or the past. It's incredibly easy to be happy when you're thinking about the present moment that you're in. And meditation has a huge impact with these things. If you all will do these few habits over the next 3 to 4 weeks, you will find it really is quite incredible, like how much happier you just catch yourself being on a daily basis. And they're simple action steps, but it's just a matter of forming the daily discipline of doing them. So that's like the first thing I want to talk to you about today is like simple habits that you guys can do like right now to raise your overall level of happiness. But what I want to talk to you about, like the second thing, is how to become more self-aware. Because one of the biggest things that psychologists talk about that millennials lack is self-awareness and emotional intelligence, like emotional maturity, because we typically are not very good at discerning why we're feeling the way we're feeling. Part of that is technology, is how fast-paced our society is, how quickly everything happens. And we're constantly glued to a cell phone, a tablet, a computer. We never really take time to actually sit and process. Becoming a lot more self-aware has a huge impact, because what you start to notice about yourself when you actually stop for a moment and say, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling right now? Because a lot of times what happens in life is we've put up these filters in our brain of how we view the world. And we process everything through that filter, even if that filter is completely off base. So I want to give you an example of this, because we all have these. All of you guys have positive filters in your brain and negative filters in your brain. And the thing about them is they're all self-created. None of them are real. Things that happen in life to you, the event itself is real. Everything else is interpretation. Everything else is interpretation. Any of you guys, and you don't have to raise a hand on this, but have insecurities that stem from a middle school where you were teased, bullied, things along those lines. And if me and Eric are walking down the hall and he says a joke and we're laughing, and then I look up and see you, even though we don't know you, you see two people walking down the hall laughing and then look at you, and immediately you think, why are they laughing at me? Does that make sense? I know a lot of people that struggle with that. Like, I'll be in a coffee shop with some people, and they'll see a couple that like are laughing at a table and look over and they immediately are like insecure that somehow that person who's across the coffee shop that clearly is not laughing at them, but that's right where their brain goes, because that's where it's gone since they were 12. Is this making sense? Can any of you relate to that a little bit? Not necessarily that exact example, but there's things like that you catch yourself in life misinterpreting things. There was a gal I worked with. I'll give you a story. She is a just awesome girl. Like, everyone I know loves this girl. She transferred from a school in Michigan down to TCU in Texas. And, she was calling me, and, I was mentoring her, and she was telling me how she's having a really tough adjustment. And she was like, I'm just really struggling to make friends down here. I really feel like everyone's judging me. I feel like everyone's just constantly like, I just don't fit in here, all this. And I go down there and, had breakfast. She was crying to me about a bunch of the stuff. And then later in the day, we were walking across campus together, and we literally left the building. And between the one building and the next building that we were going to, which was like a 4-minute walk, she had 3 different people on campus come right up. She was like, oh my gosh, Alejandra, it's so good to see you. Like, hey, are we still going to hang out later today? It was like, I'm like looking at like the homecoming queen or something at TCU that everyone knows and everyone was super excited to go see. And by the time we got to the other building, I was just looked at it, I was like, were those like 4 of the people that hate you here on campus? Or, none of the friends that you've made? She's like, okay, well, no, okay, I guess I get your point that, yeah. Okay, I guess I've made more friends than I really, but her perception, the filter she put in her brain, was a very self-defeating one. And we all have those. We all have negative perceptions about ourselves. We all have negative perceptions about others that we filter things through. And so this is what I would encourage you and really challenge you to do, is start to catch yourself and say, what are the filters that I believe? Like, what are the things that I believe that cloud my judgment towards how I view the world? What are some of the filters I put up? The best analogy I've ever heard for this is your spam box for your email. Is so frequently, like I have no idea in my email. I've always been curious, like, how does the spam filter, like, who programs that? How do they decide? Our company spam filter always filters American Airlines to the spam filter, which cracks me up. I don't know if they're anti-American or something, but it just cracks me up because I'm like, every time I book an American flight, I know I'm gonna have to go to my spam filter and like click it over too, and I don't know how to change it. But maybe I just need to get better technology. But it's funny because our brains, I think, operate the same way. Is whenever there's data that you have anytime events happen to you that confirm your current worldview, it goes in your inbox. Anytime you have something happen to you that does not confirm your current worldview, your brain doesn't even acknowledge it. It just sends it into the spam filter. Every time Alejandra was walking across campus and someone came up and ran up to her and was like, oh my gosh, hey, it's so good to see you, it was just like spam box. It's like right away, her brain didn't interpret that as, man, I'm actually starting to fit in here. Her brain did not interpret that as, like, gosh, I really have a lot of friends out here. And her brain just spam box right away. And then every single time she might see someone over in a coffee shop laughing and then look over at her, her brain's like, yep, see? Does that make sense? Hey, you guys catch yourself doing that, something similar? Yeah? It's easy to do. It's easy to do. And again, it's not just that social example. It's anything. Anything that you believe, you'll have a tendency to find evidence that it's true. And if you can become more self-aware and catch yourself responding to people, responding to events, and making it more than it is, you'll become much happier in the moment because you stop making things bigger than they actually are. If you guys were I was giving this talk at Penn State 2 weeks ago at this point. And this is kind of a fun exercise for yourself. But let's say that you and I go to a bank. And it's lunch hour, we go to a bank, robber comes in. Bank robber, alarms go off, police sirens start coming. Bank robber fires off one shot, basically accidentally because he gets nervous, and you get shot in the arm. What would be a pretty natural way? The guy gets arrested, we're all leaving the bank, you got bandaged up, and me and you are walking out. Now, what would be a pretty natural way for you to process what just happened out loud? If you're like, what would you immediately think about that you just got shot?
First time getting shot in the arm.
Oh my gosh, that's my first time getting shot in the arm. What else do you think it would be easy to think, like thoughts that would go through your head about the fact that you were the one person that got shot in the bank?
So unlucky.
Yeah, how unlucky. Like, wouldn't it be easy to think that yourself? Be like, man, there's 100 people in the bank and I get shot. How easy would it be for that to be the thought? How easy would it be for there to be a thought? I was like, I don't even go to the bank that much. Like, I literally have not been in a bank in the last 3 months. I go this day when there's a robber. Like, what are the odds of me going to the bank on that day and then I have 100 people, I'm the one to get shot? Wouldn't that be easy to do? Now, couldn't you process it through a different lens and say, oh my gosh, like, holy cow, that was like 4 inches I'd be dead.
I'm the 1%.
I would be dead if that, Like, or it would be like, man, thank God it wasn't like 2 inches left. There was like a little kid standing right behind me that would have been head level. Does that make sense? There's a lot of different ways. So what was funny about this at Penn State was I gave this talk, and then I walked out and immediately went to my car, and on the windshield wiper was what I thought was a ticket. It wasn't a ticket. That was in a meter. It was a police report, and I needed to call because someone had sideswiped my rental car while I was in giving the lecture. And, person was like, hey, please call this number, whoever wrote up the accident report. And my immediate thought was just like, of course. Like, why did they have to hit my car? Because isn't that kind of the natural human response? And then I was like, man, tomorrow I'm totally slammed. When am I possibly going to find time to call the insurance agency? I literally have back-to-back stuff for the next, darn it, And then it was funny because I thought that for about 10 seconds, and then I laughed, and I was like, I just gave a lecture on this. And then I was like, man, thank God the guy actually called the police. He could have totally driven off. Like, the guy who hit my car did not have to leave his insurance information. He could have totally just hit and run. And then I would have been on the hook for fixing the car. I would have to pay the $1,000 deductible. My insurance went up. And all of a sudden I was like, man, thank God I only got shot in the arm. Because here's the deal with all of those things. This is the reason why I tell you the story. The only thing that was real is you got shot in the arm. The only thing that was real was my car got hit and the guy left his insurance information. Everything else, the way your brain chooses to interpret that, is completely self-created. None of it's real. You were in the bank that day. It wasn't 4 inches there. Good or bad. Whether you choose to interpret it for the good or for the bad, both of it's just crap because none of it's real. It's all in your head. The only thing that's real is you got shot in the arm. And if you catch yourself interpreting events, I just love telling myself that out loud. Be like, truth is I just got shot in the arm. That's it. If you have a really tough day, let's say you just sleep horribly tonight, just kind of one of those nights where you're restless, you can barely fall asleep, and then, you go to class the next day, you bomb a quiz because you're just like, and now you're frustrated and tired, sleep deprived, and you get home, and one of your pet peeves is when your roommate doesn't do the dishes, and you come there and there's a bunch of dishes sitting in the, in the sink. How easy immediately is your brain going to go to, oh my gosh, like how many times do I have to talk to her about this? Seriously, like she knows how much that drives me crazy that she doesn't do her dishes. Like my roommate doesn't even respect me. I feel like she doesn't even value me as a friend. And like all of a sudden your brain goes to this really horrible place about your roommate. How many of you guys have had things like that with a roommate or a friend before where you really emotionally overrespond in your own head? What's true is you got shot in the arm. Like the only thing that's true is your roommate hasn't done the dishes yet. That's the only thing that's true in this scenario. You creating this about like she doesn't even respect me, he doesn't even value me as a friend, I can't believe how little she is so inconsiderate. That's all just in your brain. None of that's actually real. Does this make sense to you guys? Catch yourself, because this level of emotional maturity makes life so much more fun. When you actually catch yourself and you catch yourself having that kind of response, I always try to ask myself, why am I actually feeling this way? Because you're all going to have totally irrational emotions. I laugh when people talk about becoming more emotionally consistent. That is impossible. Like that is not, and nor is it really desirable. I don't want to become more emotionally consistent. I have no desire for that. However, I do have a desire in my life to not let my emotions control my actions. I do have a desire in my life to not dwell upon negative emotions that are really self-created. Because having the emotion and dwelling upon the emotion are two very different things, aren't they? Does that make sense? And dwelling upon negative emotion is just self-indulgent. Because all of you guys know that, if I just stopped and thought about 3 things I'm thankful for, if I just stopped and reframed this in my brain, I could feel a lot better almost immediately. So why don't we do that? Why don't we do that? Or like a friend comes and tries to cheer you up. Any of you guys pulled that number before where a friend comes and they're like, hey, come on, let's get out of here. Like, we need to cheer you up. And your response is, no, don't, just leave me alone. I don't want you to cheer me up. How many of you guys have done that number before with a friend? Isn't that kind of funny that you have a friend of yours trying to cheer you up and your response is like, no, friend of mine. Don't try to exchange my misery for happiness, friend. Where does that stem from? Why do you think we do that as human beings? That someone's actually trying to help you not hate life. And you're like, no, I would prefer to hate life right now, thanks. Where does that come from? Because we all do it sometimes. What do y'all think? Where does that stem from? There's not a right or wrong answer. This is not a leading question where I'm looking for a specific answer from you guys. I'm curious what you guys think causes that. Whatever it is emotionally indulgent. And it doesn't help. It doesn't help, does it? Wouldn't you guys rather be happy than miserable? And so much of this stems from that emotional maturity of actually being self-aware enough to catch yourself in that negative thought pattern and choosing to correct it, which is hard. I'm not saying any of this stuff is easy, but if you'll do some of those habits I listed at the very beginning, if you'll form the habit of just journaling about 3 things you're grateful for every single day, if you get in the habit of exercising routinely, setting aside a little bit of time for meditation or prayer, but just some quiet time for yourself, and you'll commit conscious acts of kindness on a daily basis, all of these things work, but they only work if you do them. They only work if you do them. And if you want to really, really know how to master this stuff, it's about becoming disciplined enough that you're willing to do the things that you don't feel like doing when you least feel like doing them. But you do them anyway. The happy people I know are the ones that just choose to be happy. The most disciplined people I know that have the highest levels of career success are simply the ones that choose to act even when they least feel like it. I once heard a quote that discipline is doing the thing that you said you were going to do while motivated, long after the motivation in which you said it has passed. You guys should all set really high goals, academically, professionally, all that, while motivated. And then you know what? When you're not motivated, don't use that lack of motivation as an excuse to break your commitment. Because that's what we all have a tendency to do as human beings, is be like, I'm just not motivated right now. Who cares? How is that relevant? Does that make sense? Do you actually need to be motivated to get your ass up and go to the gym? No, you could just go. Is it easier when you're motivated? Totally. But you don't need it. And if you want to learn how to be the type of person that has incredible levels of success at whatever you do, whether it be academically, professionally, physically, mentally, emotionally, all these things, it's about doing the little habits. Because all of this stuff, are any of the things that I've listed off on there complicated? Are all of you capable of writing down 3 things you're thankful for tonight in a journal and then doing it the same thing tomorrow night? And then after that? Are all of you guys capable of setting your alarm tomorrow and actually working out in the morning? All of you guys are capable of it. It's just who will actually do it. Because none of this stuff works if you don't. Is this good stuff? Will you guys use some of this? Yeah? Become more aware of your filter. Become more aware when you catch yourself having an emotional response. I allow myself, this is my exception for myself, is I allow myself to be stressed, mad, frustrated, sad, angry, any of those really negative emotions if I have a friend or family member in the hospital or in like serious life or death critical type condition. If that's not the case, then I'm like, oh, okay, that doesn't fit my criteria. I guess I shouldn't be stressed right now. Because everything else passes, right? Like, is there anything else that will seem that big a year from now? The worst case scenario in a class that you have is you fail it. Then you know what you do? You retake it. It's not ideal. I'm not encouraging you to fail classes. You know what I mean? Like, so ask yourself, what can I do to change it? What can I do to impact this? Fail your first quiz, you can study harder. You can go to office hours. You can seek out, but does stressing about it add anything? No, in fact, it actually holds you back. You know? But doing all of these things and coaching yourself through this has a massive, massive impact on your overall happiness as well as your success throughout college. And then into your early careers when you go into it. Cool stuff? Yeah? Do you guys have questions about any of this? Any thoughts about this stuff? Questions, comments? Well, here's what we want to do. Is I want you guys to break off in smaller groups of 4 to 5. And I want you to actually discuss, like, from this content, what hit you the most and what you're actually going to do out of this. Like, what you're going to take from tonight and actually use. Cool?